Your Honour, following on from submissions presented by my lone senior, counsel for the defence now moves on to submission 3, that the chain of factual causation as defined under Section 11 of the Civil Liability Act has been broken, as there is no material evidence to suggest that the event would not have happened but for the lack of security presence. Section 11 of the Civil Liability Act provides legislative framework for required conditions of the causation element of negligence. Subsection 1A states that the breach of duty is to be a necessary condition of the occurrence of the harm. Counsel for the defence submits that the lack of security personnel did not provide this necessary condition that is so required by legislation. In the case of Adil's Palace, it was concluded at paragraph 48 that presence of security would only be shown to be deterrence for an attack if it was assumed the attacker would have acted rationally. This is backed up by the case of Modbury, where in paragraph 107, Justice Hayne asserted that the conduct of criminal assailants is not necessarily dictated by reason or prudential considerations, and there is no basis for deciding whether the conduct of the assailant would have been affected by such changes. As in the case of Rudy Hill, the attack on the plaintiff was sudden and unexpected. The assailant seemingly showed no regard to who was around him, focusing solely on his victim at the time of the attack. Once the assailant noticed eyes on him, he then dropped the scooter and fled. This not only suggests that he was in a state of tunnel vision and would not have noticed additional people in the area, as he did not notice the defendant's companion, but also that it is not unreasonable to think that the assailant may not have been acting in a way that was based on reason at the time of the attack. As was so concluded in paragraph 74 of Rudy Hill, no conclusion could be made that it was probable that the assault would not have occurred had there been security personnel with the pair. Your Honour, I will now direct the Court's attention to submission 4. Counsel for the defence submits that the plaintiff has not suffered loss that is recognised by law as a result of any breach by the defendant, as the event was not reasonably foreseeable at the time. Section 11, subsection 1B of the Civil Liabilities Act provides a second principle with which actions in negligence have to comply with, that it is appropriate for the scope of the liability of the person in breach to extend to the harm so caused. As touched on by senior counsel, we for the defence submit that this has not been satisfied. Looking to the case of Modbury, Justice Callanan expresses at paragraph 136 that the problem about criminal conduct is that at one and the same time, it may be both unpredictable in actual incidents, but always on the cards. All that will be possible is some reduction in the risk. In the current case, the defence submits that the defendant carried out actions which would reasonably be considered a reduction of such a risk. While it is true that the event was not so remote as to have been considered ludicrous, we submit that the event was remote enough to not be reasonably foreseeable at the time. The fact that there is always some risk, and that the risk is higher when consuming alcohol, as stated in Adil's Palace at paragraph 38, does not necessitate that all issues arising from situations with alcohol should be foreseeable and therefore avoidable. The actions and reactions of the assailant and his friend showed no real indication that there would be a further altercation once the two pairs left the venue separately. There was no violence in the first altercation, and the pair left stating they were heading elsewhere. In conclusion, Your Honour, the defence has submitted that while there was undoubtedly a duty of care owed to the plaintiff as a patron of the establishment, the dispute arises in the scope of that duty, and the denial by our defence that the duty owed to the plaintiff was indeed broken. We rather submit that the duty of care was satisfied pursuant to cases Adil's Palace, Packer, Modbury and Rudy Hill. All of these cases point to the fact that an occupier's duty is based on taking reasonable care to reduce the risk of such occurrences, just as our client has done in this case. The defendant carried out all actions available to him at the time to minimise the risk of any further altercation. Additionally, we have submitted, based on Modbury and Adil's Palace, as well as the Civil Liability Act, that risk alone is not enough to impose a duty, and breach of duty must be found in the level of control exercised by the occupier, of which the defendant showed adequately. These cases and the relevant statute show that no breach of duty has occurred. Furthermore, it is submitted that the chain of causation has not been satisfied, as it is not obvious that the incident would not have occurred but for the lack of security presence in the car park. It is not the court's job to become mind readers, and we are not to know for sure what would have happened had there been security there on the night. However, based on the sudden and unexpected nature of the attack, analogous with the Rudy Hill case, we submit that events of the night would still have occurred, relying on the balance of probabilities. Our last point, Your Honour, is that while this incident was not far-fetched and so remote as to be unreal, it was still not a reasonably foreseeable event. We have pointed to Adil's Palace and Modbury for reference to situations surrounding alcohol, reinforcing that alcohol consumption does not necessitate that all issues are foreseeable. The actions and words of the assailant were seemingly clear, leaving without event and telling the defendant where they were going. If an offence of this nature becomes reasonably foreseeable, it begs the question, at what point did we stop taking a person's words and actions as the truth? And if we are not taking people and actions for what they are, where does that leave us? The defence therefore submits that the case be found in favour of the defendant on the basis of the aforementioned submissions. Thank you.